Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
New survey data show military families facing sustained financial and daily life pressures, from childcare to employment, that are starting to affect stability and readiness. As demands on the force grow, those strains are getting harder to ignore. Kathy Roth Douquet of Blue Star Families joins me with what the latest numbers show. Kathy, it is so great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining me.
Thrilled to be here, Terry. Thank you.
We are wrapping up May as Military Appreciation Month, and Blue Star Families' annual Military Families Snapshot comes out with some really important headlines. As you think about this year's release, what are the big findings that you want people to know about?
One thing is that Military Appreciation Month actually makes a tangible difference. One of our key findings in our survey is that people who are experiencing good engagement in their local communities are more motivated to stay in the military, they're more resilient, and they're more likely to recommend military service to others. So I'd love to tell you a little bit about how we got to that. We saw over time that increasingly people are feeling less likely to recommend military service, military families. It's steadily dropped from 60% to 55% to 40%. Now we're under 40% since 2016. And we wanted to dig deeper into what was going on. And one of the things we looked at was who was having a good experience in the community where they live, who feels a sense of belonging, who feels that their community appreciates them, and who doesn't. And what we found when looking at the different groups is that those groups that felt a sense of belonging, felt their communities appreciated them, they were feeling great about their military service. They were recommending it to others. So the time that Americans spend, the time that governments spend, the time that schools and employers spend expressing that appreciation in meaningful ways actually improves our national security. That's a big finding.
That is so cool and so important. Is that a universal geographic finding, or do you find that it's concentrated in certain areas of the country?
Interestingly, it's universal. Often people think, well, there are some places that are very military friendly. San Diego, Norfolk, maybe even Washington, D.C. But an individual person who's moving to a place who doesn't know another person will not have that experience of that support unless they're having some connection on the ground. That's really what Blue Star Families Chapters is all about, is to make that easier. But it's also this call to action that we have right now that's called Do Your Part, where we're asking everyone else in America to take part as well. When we look at the other factors in the survey that are really making a difference in military life, military spouse employment, time away from family, childcare challenges, housing concerns, all of these in some ways are alleviated. Even military pay are alleviated by strong support at the community level.
Let's dig into some of those other specifics that you just mentioned and start with financial strain and stability. I suspect that most Americans do not consider military families food insecure or housing insecure, and yet this issue of financial pressure comes up really loud and clear through your survey results. Talk to us about what you found.
It really is coming through loud and clear. Overall, 1 out of 6 military families are having a hard time getting access to healthy food during the entire month. 1 out of 6, that includes your officers, that includes, all walks of life. But in some areas, for instance, when we look at New York City, it's 1 out of 3 who are having a problem. The cost of living has skyrocketed in America. The war is not only a strain on the 50 to 60,000 deployed troops and their families, but every American is facing rising costs. We're also seeing housing costs go up a lot in places that military families are stationed. San Diego, Miami is a very notable place. All of this is putting an enormous pressure on military families' finances, and then it's a double whammy with the heightened unemployment and underemployment that military spouses face. So these are addressable concerns, but if we don't address them, they really undermine the health of the force.
Let's go on to that issue of military spouse employment and childcare. They've been at the top of the list for as long as I can remember the survey's results. You've got a new survey out on military spouses. What are you finding there?
Terry, I'm really excited about this survey, and especially I'm excited about our funders, USAA, PenFed, and Navy Federal, that allowed us to really take a deep and long look. Since 2012, when Blue Star Families identified military spouse unemployment as being above 20%, it hasn't moved. So what we wanted to do is not examine the problem, but look at the solution. When military spouses are successfully employed over time, what can we learn from that? What about their employers? What about them? It shows the difference. So we released the survey yesterday at the Milken Institute, these findings. And what we saw is that really flexible work, a great level of education, remote work, all of that really makes a difference, as does mentorship. But our study was really informative because we looked at people over 3 years. And we had a group that was 43% had advanced degrees, as opposed to 14% of the national average. 43% had advanced degrees. Of that group, only 22% were consistently employed over 3 years. Only 22% held a job for 3 years. So this is a really talented, employed, educated group, and that's what they're facing. So it's a very real problem that's due to the challenges of the military lifestyle, the frequent moves. Employers can make a difference by allowing for remote work and flexible hours and having mentorship. I think these are important headlines because if we're really going to solve the financial problems military families are facing, we're never going to be able to raise military pay enough. We're only going to get there if we get those second salaries that two-income families need.
Kathy Roth Douquet is the CEO of Blue Star Families. Kathy, let's come back to this because you're talking about financial pressure, family pressure, a lot of different kinds of issues that military families are dealing with. But you make the point that these are not just quality of life issues, that they connect to force readiness. Walk us through the dots there.
We know that the number one reason that otherwise promotable people leave military service is because they're concerned about their family's well-being. Often it's because of a spouse's job. I talked to Secretary Hagel when he was leaving being Secretary of Defense, and he told me that last day that he had in office, he had breakfast with 6 West Point lieutenants who were nearing the end of their commitment. 5 out of 6 were leaving service, and the reason that all 5 were leaving is that they were concerned about the ability of their spouses to pursue their careers. So we know that this undermines people staying in the military who are talented, who we want to keep. But we also see in our survey that military spouses who are successfully employed are more willing to recommend military service. Their service members are more willing to recommend military service to their children and to other young people. So the financial well-being of military families, it's absolutely a matter of national security today, right now, but also for our future force.
You're talking about these issues, and they have been trending for quite a while. Is there anything that popped up as a new finding in this year's surveys that you really want to make sure people know about?
The solutions are what I'm so excited about. So one of the solutions that we found from this spouse survey is that employers can make a difference by providing flexibility in location and hours and by providing mentorship. We see that solutions happen at the community level. This is one of the reasons we have our chapters. But when a community can show itself to be supportive of its military families through their schools, through the workplace, through the other kinds of engagements, those families are feeling less financial strain, and they're also more likely to say they're going to stay in service and recommend it. It turns out that most people solve problems through people they know. So if you have a welcoming community, if you have your spouse is more likely to find a job because you find a job through somebody you know. If your schools and your sports teams and all of these kinds of enterprises are welcoming, it makes a difference. So it's a call to action, really, for employers, for schools, for cultural institutions, all of those to do their part to show that military families are valued in their community and can be integrated.
Well, let's talk about the institutional problem solvers for a minute. Is there anything here that Congress, legislatively, or the military leadership through policy could do to address some of these concerns?
There's a number of things. We have a workforce tax credit act in Congress right now, asking for tax credits for employers who hire military spouses. That would be a great help to encourage people to do so. Government employers need to allow for flexibility, particularly location-based flexibility for military spouse employees. 11% of the people in our survey were employed by the federal government. They need to, if the government can allow them to keep their jobs as they move and have some flexibility with hours in the face of deployments, that makes an enormous difference. So there's absolutely some very important policy interventions that can help.
Kathy Roth Douquet is the CEO of Blue Star Families. Kathy, thank you so much for what you and your organization are doing on these really important issues.
I really appreciate you having us there, and I encourage your listeners to come to our website to learn how they and their offices can do their part.
Thanks, Kathy. We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.